Just a few technical issues. We'll be starting in just 1 second. It's the Let's Talk Polyamory podcast, where we talk about all things consensual non-monogamy, polyamory, swinging, and all things about how you can have a secure and sexy relationship. Now here's your hosts, Tara and Andre.
Excellent.
Hey, Andre.
Hey, Tara, how are you?
Let's start that one more time.
Okay.
Hey, Andre.
Hey, Tara.
How's it going today?
It's going well, thanks. How are you?
I'm doing great.
Mm-hmm.
Super happy to be here with you for
Indeed.
a brand new episode of the Let's Talk Polyamory podcast. So, Andre,
Yes.
have you heard of the term accidental polyamory?
I have, but it's not all that common for me to hear about it. You want to tell me a little bit about what it is, or tell our listeners what it is about?
Well, we'll get to that in just a moment, but it's someone I know recently referred to accidental polyamory as something that they stumbled into.
Mm-hmm.
So we thought today we would talk about the topic accidental polyamory. Now what?
Let's do it.
So before we jump in, let's do some introductions for those who don't know us or maybe listening for the first time. So I'm Tara. I am a relationship and awesomeness coach.
And I'm Andre Turcotte. I am a sex-positive psychotherapist.
Awesome.
I almost forgot.
And our passion is to help individuals and couples navigate consensual non-monogamy in a way that feels safe and secure and sexy.
Mm-hmm.
So we do this through this podcast. We also have some programs and services we provide, both on the therapeutic side and the coaching side. Yeah. So today we also have a special offer that we're going to share at the end. And you can also check out our website, which has a list of all the cool stuff, including some freebies you might enjoy. Yeah.
Free stuff is always good.
Yeah.
Or is it? Is there any value in free stuff?
Well, it's an interesting thing because often people will get something for free and then sometimes they don't value as much as something that they may pay for. So anyway. Interesting psychology. But we do have some cool things that get you started and might get you interested in dating. We have a dating guide. We have a tool about choosing your style of non-monogamy, all kinds of things.
So there's value there. And check
Awesome
it out. Yeah. Take what you want and leave the rest.
Amazing. Okay. So on to today's episode. Okay. I'm super excited. So what is accidental polyamory?
Yeah. So what is it? Tell us. We're dying to know.
Okay. So this is what some people call those unexpected journeys that lead yourself and as an individual, or if you're in a couple, into exploring polyamory or non-monogamous dynamics, either as a willing participant or maybe even with some fear or resistance. And so in this episode, there can be a couple of different kind of unexpected scenarios that could come up for people that we'll talk about in this episode.
So it's as opposed to really thinking about it in a kind of premeditated way or conscious way of saying, okay, let's see what we can do to have different relating styles. This is we kind of fall into it or being
pulled into it. Yeah.
Interesting.
So then we're also going to cover some definitions that you may not have heard before, like polybombing or a polybomb, and also cowboy and cowgirl, which I thought that's a new one for me too, which I thought was kind of interesting.
Yeah, interesting terms and interesting phenomena.
That people might find themselves in. So there's basically, and when we think about accidental polyamory, we were sort of thinking that there might be three kind of basic scenarios that can come up. So did you want to go over them? Or?
Sure. Okay, so let's see. The three basic scenarios would be being in a monogamous relationship with your partner and wanting to explore non-monogamy.
Absolutely.
Okay. And
either you or your partner.
Right. And okay, exactly. And then being single and dating, and you meet someone who's already dating in a relationship with other people, and you're like, that's interesting.
Yep.
And the third scenario could be already a swinger in an open relationship and want to move towards polyamory. So you're mostly wanting to do it on a sexual, physical way with low emotionally, and all of a sudden you say, maybe I want to be more emotionally or more committed in that.
Yeah, cool. Absolutely. Awesome. So we're going to share some stories, including some things about people we know, and of course, advice, and for anyone unexpectedly finding themselves in this position.
Okay.
So let's start with the first scenario. So you're in a monogamous relationship and someone wants to explore non-monogamy. So imagine, so here's kind of the picture, right? And there's a couple different scenarios that can come up. So you're in a monogamous relationship, happily tripling along, and one partner expresses a desire to explore consensual non-monogamy or open the relationship. Now, sometimes it can be both people, but we're kind of dealing with the sort of more surprise element.
Yeah, because if it's both people, then there's probably less in the way of red flags. But if you are the other person or your partner is doing it too, do you automatically right away say, well, what's wrong with me? Am I not good enough? Am I not enough? Is this not enough for you? And we could automatically go into that rabbit hole thinking, well, it's got to be because you're not satisfied, as opposed to possibly seeing the benefits or the stimulation, the different facets of it, the possible parts, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think this can happen a couple of ways. So it can happen more generally, like maybe you or or the other person, sorry, has been thinking about being non-monogamous for a while. Maybe it was something that you had explored in the past and enjoyed. Maybe it's something you just got exposed to. Maybe somebody you know is non-monogamous. That sometimes happens, and people go like, "Oh, wow, this might be something I'm interested in."
Yeah, you hear about it in the news, right? It's becoming more and more mainstream. It's becoming more spoken about, more popular. So people are like, wow, like maybe we could consider that as well. And just the thought of that, does it automatically imply, well, it's because you're not satisfied with the way things are?
Yeah, so that's kind of the one way. It's more general. But the other way, which I think is the kind of trickier situation when you're in a monogamous relationship, is that one of the people meets somebody and is unexpectedly attracted to them and then brings up the idea of non-monogamy. So yeah.
So in that, if they meet somebody and then they get the idea, oh, maybe we do that, is there automatically that component of NRE that's present, right? Because now they are, kind of titillated by this other person. So does that energy carry through, and does that then speak to our insecurities, right? So I met somebody else who's doing this. I think, wow, that'd be cool for us, and I'm excited by it. And then I come to you with the idea, and you're like, whoa, like I didn't imagine this was happening. And in addition to this concept, there's already a person there to potentially feel these feelings of insecurity.
Yeah. So I think that's why that's kind of situation can be trickier, especially like the person who's bringing it up, like you said, they're already like, ooh, there's somebody I would want to do this. And what if my partner doesn't agree to this? Or what if we can't make this happen? So, and I think in this scenario, and I recently talked to somebody who's in this situation where, and I think it happens a lot, where one person's been thinking about it for a while. You're scrolling too far.
No, I'm right. Just perfect.
One person has been thinking about it for a while, and so say it was me. I've been thinking about it for a while. I'm imagining in my head, I'm fantasizing the situations, I'm kind of working through how I would feel about it and that sort of thing. And then I approach you and I say, hey, either scenario, whether it's more generally, and then I say to you, hey, like, this is the thing I want to explore. And then I think, because this is where like the polybombing idea comes in, because you've been thinking about it for a while, but the other person is sort of like not caught up yet. And so you're ready to go. Like it's like as soon as it's out there, you're like, okay, let's go. You know what I mean? And I think that commonly happens.
So how do we then announce it without it being a surprise? How could we ever let the person know that this might be something we would consider, or find out, take the temperature with them without saying, well, here we go?
Yeah. Well, there's a couple things you can do, but can I give a few definitions first?
Let's do it.
Because I wanted to cover polybombing. Yeah, so this is the idea where one partner overwhelms the other person with polyamory so fast and so hard that they really don't have time to stop and think about what if it's something they want. And I think that's when you kind of go into those automatic feelings, right? And polybombing can take many forms. Which would include things like, for the person who's already in it, they're like, let's talk about it all the time. What kind of scenarios are we going to get to? Let's plan some dates. They might like go on to applications and like try to meet somebody. They say how happy they would be being non-monogamous and how it's something they've always wanted. And I think it can sometimes leave the other person maybe feeling guilty or having a hard time expressing discomfort, or like, not wanting to disappoint them, or thinking that it's sorry, Or thinking that it's an ultimatum in some ways.
Oh, yeah.
Is that what you were going to say? Oh.
No, I was thinking about when you say polybombing, it makes me think of love bombing from the narcissist, and how there's like a malicious aspect to it. But this polybombing might simply be the curiosity or enthusiasm that the person wants without really that kind of manipulative or malicious intent.
Yeah, exactly. And I think sometimes it is, like you say, it's unintentional and you may not mean to do this, but you've gone, like I see this happen all the time. You've gone through, it's so much in your mind and you've normalized it and the other person hasn't had the chance. And I think it's easy to become really excited about, polyamory or opening a relationship and all it has to be, has to offer.
So even if it's not your intention, perhaps you hearing this will be mindful of the potential for it and say, well, okay, let me resist polybombing them. Let me kind of, be aware of my enthusiasm, but also be aware that the other person may not yet be fully there.
Yeah. Yeah. And that your partner might want to go at a different speed than you. And sometimes, it's going to be, take a while for someone to get comfortable.
Right.
Or maybe they may not get comfortable at all. So that's another potential, right? And what would you do if you're the one that really wanted this? So are you in a position where now you have to make a choice?
And then also, if you were the one who was saying no to it, are you then thinking, well, is the other person dissatisfied? Are they going to feel as though they're not getting what they want? And will they be resentful towards that? So we'd have to talk about it and find out really, how we feel about it, what our motives are, and what's going on inside.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you can come to a place, even if you're not, like people do mono-poly relationships where one person remains monogamous and one person remains polyamorous. But I think in order for those to be truly successful, I think there has to be a lot of great things, a lot of things in place to make them feel secure, like really good communication, agreements, feeling still for the monogamous person, feeling important, and that it's not just that you're there because you've always been there,
It makes me think, we often say try everything twice. And I wonder if this would apply for people who are not poly. Should they try it twice? And could you ever walk back from that? Could you ever try it and say, well, we gave it a good shot and it's not for us. And are we okay with that? It's like seeing and then trying to unsee what has been seen. It's something to consider.
Yeah, and I think that happens too with people who've been polyamorous for some time. Sometimes you go through seasons where you don't really want to explore it, right? You don't want to be outwardly polyamorous. Like maybe you're still polyamorous in your heart, but in your day-to-day, you're being more monogamous, and that's okay. So I know you wanted to talk about how do you navigate these conversations and potential changes.
Okay, let's talk about it.
So I think the first thing, is to be patient, especially if you're the one, like if you're the one that's wanting to change things in a monogamous relationship to something that's more non-monogamous, is being patient, but also the person who's exposed to it accidentally, unexpectedly, is to be patient with yourself. And it's okay to have your feelings. I think that's something that people also have a hard time with as well.
I think that's being patient is really good universally. It applies to so many things. What is my rush? What is the pressing motivation there? And what happens if it is delayed? Because, like I said, once you go into it, you cannot not have been in it.
Yes.
So it is good to really take some time, talk about it, examine your feelings, invite the other person to share their feelings and thoughts about it, and then make a conscientious decision about it.
So, yeah. So did you say speak open? Was that?
I guess that is the idea of speaking freely and open about it.
Yeah.
And often.
Yeah. And creating a safe space for everybody to express their concerns and be heard.
Yeah.
And that's where it's really important to have active listening and really allow the person to express their feelings.
Yeah. And it's not a one-time only offer, right?
Yes.
Maybe we have to come back to it a couple of times and really get to that point where we do feel comfortable with that, at least comfortable about talking about it. Maybe we're not even comfortable with the idea of doing it, but we can at least talk about it in a more open and comfortable way.
Yeah, because I think if you've never considered it before, it would be shocking to you. And there'd be a lot of things I think you need to go through in order to feel more comfortable with it. Maybe not, though. Maybe it's something, you never know. Someone else may be wanting to do this their whole life, and then all of a sudden somebody mentions it and you're like, oh, like amazing.
Yeah, but maybe it's like kind of saying, yeah, let's jump on that roller coaster. And then did we really anticipate that it was going to have all these peaks and valleys? And did we really know what was going to lie ahead of us? And we don't really know until we've been on there, but we can talk about what we think it's going to be like and see, what are we expecting? What are we afraid of? All those different possibilities. But let's talk about it perhaps a little bit before we just jump into it and then say, well, we didn't consider that.
Yeah. So I think that's where you need to consider everyone's needs and desires and fears,
Does it feel like we're trying to talk people out of it?
Oh, no, absolutely not. I think it's just showing that accidental part and that, you may be, I don't know. I just heard so many times people talk about getting really excited about it and then they bring it up to their partner and it's like, wah, wah, you know what I mean? Or it's like really causes an issue for people. It can. But I mean, I think it's also creates lots of opportunity. And I think you mentioned taking your time, which I think is important. And I think we were talking about this the other day, I think, going at the pace the person that needs the most time. What do you think about that?
It's beautiful to be considered. But then as the person who is trying to be patient, do we feel as though they are progressing enough? Are we moving the needle? But then it makes me think of progressive communication. So can we say something that will enlighten us or add to that dialogue to help explore those feelings?
Yeah, because I've also heard people say, like, I'm not comfortable yet and we have to wait, but then not really actively doing anything to feel more comfortable, right?
Yeah, they're just kicking it down.
Okay, let's revisit this in a month. Let's revisit it in 2 months.
Hoping to just put it off and avoid it rather than actually looking at it and exploring it, processing.
Yeah. So that's when you sort of one partner brings it up and you're in a monogamous relationship. So this is a little bit similar, but you're single. You're single and you meet someone who is non-monogamous.
So you are single as a monogamist or serial dater or whatever it is, but you are single and then you meet somebody who is polyamorous. They are another way.
Or you find out that they have multiple partners already. There's some form of consensual non-monogamy. And you may know this going in to the relationship because it's on their dating profile and you're like, oh, that's fine. I'm only looking for sexual partners. I'm not looking for anything emotional or long-term. Or you may not know it going in and they may drop the poly bomb, as they call it. And once you become more attached emotionally.
Yeah, and it happens the other way too, right? You might be polyamorous, see somebody who's monogamous, and think like, oh, I could turn them on to the benefits of it, and I could try and lasso them into polyamory, or vice versa, right? The monogamous wants to bring the polyamorous in there, and that lassoing is where we come up with cowboy.
Yes, which we'll go into, yeah. So I think I said it at the beginning, this idea of being monogamous and meeting someone who's not. Happened to someone I know, and they had recently come from a long-term relationship, and that recently ended. And their intent was just to date and meet people and just have a good time, not get emotionally attached and that sort of thing. But they found out something very different, and I wanted to use their kind of words because I thought it was really interesting the way they put it. So this is how they described their situation. So dating a married person who's non-monogamous and accidentally realizing you may be interested in kitchen table polyamory with your spouse.
What a surprise.
Yes. And what's interesting about this person is they found out that this person they met was non-monogamous, and then it took them on this entire journey of finding out about this world that they never really knew about, but that it was something that they thought they might want when they were married, but then only got really exposed to it later. So that was one of the things. Realizing you may have started to become an accidental cowboy or cowgirl because your monogamous mindset, jealousy kicks in. So tell me about the cowboy cowgirl. I like this concept.
Well, no, I'm just thinking about what you just said there. So here I am, I date you, and then I find out that you are poly, and I'm like, well, I'm not quite sure if I'm wanting that. It might sound exciting, but my fear, my insecurities might say, well, no, I'd rather go to what's known to me. So I will try to lasso you into it, bring you over, and I become that cowboy. I become that person who's trying to convert you from one camp to the other.
Yeah. But that also could be unintentional, right? And I know for this person, it's not something that they intended. They're like, okay, yeah, I'm going to explore this. But then as soon as it becomes more real, I think once you become more emotionally invested with somebody, I think that's always when something changes. Like when you first meet someone, and you're dating and stuff like that, and you're dating a few people, I don't think that you necessarily have that same feeling. But once you really start to get that attachment and you're more invested, then I think that's when this can happen. So you could be an accidental cowboy or a cowgirl. Accidentally realizing that you may be hetero-flexible or more, because you can now explore these things that haven't been open to you before.
Interesting.
Yeah, I like that. Accidentally falling in love with more than one person and realizing not only that it's okay and normal, but it's okay to actually pursue. So, of course, depending on whatever agreements there are within the other relationship.
But that prohibition of loving more than one person has been lifted, because in the monogamous model, we're saying that you should only or can only be with one person for the rest of it. And we are disallowing, prohibiting any other type of romantic relationship. And now in this model, we're saying, well, no, and it's like perfectly acceptable. It's perfectly fantastic. And in fact, there's many benefits to having many loves.
Yeah. And I think when you fall into this situation, you may also kind of go, okay, yeah, now I can date people. But then it's like, oh, wait, but do I need to tell the other person, or how much do I have to tell them? And is it okay to date this other person? What if I like them, come to form an emotional attachment with them? And then if you're fairly new to it, it's like can be very confusing and overwhelming for some people.
Yeah. So you might feel kind of afraid of your own feelings in having that.
Yeah. You're like, what is this? It's okay, but is it okay? Or what will the other person think? Or...
Yeah, because historically from the society, you've been told that it's not permissible, right? So now that's been lifted and you're like, well, is it really safe to walk out on the ice? Am I really going to be okay if I do this? Will it really be acceptable if I announce my position this way?
Because before you may have been, you're in the position where you feel like you have to make a choice between people, right? Or you have to have some even if you believe it's okay, you have to have some hierarchical structure where one person is more important than the other.
Yeah.
So that it can bring on confusing person for the person that is newly experiencing it.
Makes me think also about how some people might have these rules that you can go out and do all these things, but you just can't fall in love with the other person.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And
so if that is the thing, then if you do catch feelings for somebody, do you have to kind of minimize it or hide it or, deny it?
Yeah.
To them or to yourself.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, lots of things. And then this was my favorite, and I had to say it was a direct quote. Accidentally finding the most amazing current and legitimate advice in the poly community that you never found in the mono community your entire life. And I mean, that doesn't mean just us, because I know them, but also because I think there's this wealth of information about polyamory, and I think and relationships in general, and even our own courses we always talk about, even though they've been formed specifically for people in polyamorous relationship, all the relationship advice is sound about, that would apply to really any relationship, like communication, agreements, all those things, and so, yeah, that was awesome.
Yeah. So how do you handle being with someone with multiple partners and determine if the relationship style suits you?
Okay. So you meet someone who's has multiple partners. So I think the first thing is, and which I told this person, was to take your time and figure out first of all, if non-monogamy is for you,
right? And
what about it appeals to you?
Yeah. Sorry, I just want to say, like, taking your time, right? So again, that is so critically important. But also, if you're ever feeling pressured by the other person's timeline, or they're giving you that, is that a red flag, right? We want to be invited, not coerced.
Yeah. And I think if you fall into it accidentally through dating, you don't have to accept the relationship structure that's presented to you. You know what I mean? So you can, the important thing is to understand and communicate your needs. What is it you want? What does you want out of it? If you have any personal boundaries that are important in the relationship, and how to communicate those. And I think the big one is to expect the unexpected.
Yeah, you're going to grow.
You're going to accidental growth opportunities. Which are amazing. And I think that's the amazing part of polyamory, at least for me. I think I've grown more in the last 7 years exploring non-monogamy with you than I think I grew my entire life in relationships, really.
And there's also the idea of realizing that there's going to be no perfect scenario or relationship, right? Because in my fantasies, like I said many times, when I imagine traveling, I always see the airport as empty with no lines, and that's the perfect scenario. But when I get to it, it's still a great thing. I'm going on that plane, but there are lines, there are some hiccups, right?
Yeah.
So the same thing in my fantasy of open relating or being polyamorous, I might think, oh, it's going to be great. I'm going to do all these benefits. But do I ever consider some of the taxes or some of the parts that will be less fantastic? But it doesn't mean that we shouldn't still take that journey.
Yeah. Everything is a learning opportunity, right? And I think it's important to not be hard on yourself or give yourself a hard time because you are struggling to navigate it, even if it's like, because I think people fall into this thing. It's like, this is what I want. I really want this. I believe this is true for me. And then they're like, I'm just struggling with XYZ. I'm struggling with jealousy. I feel insecure, all those things. And so, not adding judgment on top of having your feelings, just really examining how you feel about things and really determining what your needs are in those situations. So the third scenario is that you're already in a non-monogamous relationship. So maybe we're swingers or we're in an open relationship, but you or your partner starts developing deeper emotional connections and wants to shift to more polyamorous model. So you already want to do it, like you've already dating someone that, this idea that you're only supposed to be, have a sexual relationship, not an emotional one, and you want more, or just more generally is like you want to have these relationships that have more involved in them. Sort of.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? The difference between the emotional and the physical sexual part, many people at first say, well, they slept with somebody else, and okay, you get over that. But the emotional component, even if it's not demonstrated physically or sexually, can sometimes be much more threatening to the person who does not feel so secure.
Oh, absolutely. Especially if somebody's having like that super big NRE where all they can think of is that person. And we did a whole episode on NRE, and we'll make sure we put that in the show notes, the link to it. So how do you handle this significant change?
Yeah, good question.
And I think also there's the situation as well. If one person wants to be polyamorous and the other person wants to stay doing what you've been doing for a while, like swinger and that sort of thing.
So monopoly.
No, not monopoly. No, this is where you're already non-monogamous. So you're swinger, lifestyle, doing stuff together, or just having, an open relationship, but not forming those really strong bonds. So, we know some people that kind of, when we talk to them, they talk about wanting slightly different things. And, where one person really wants to enjoy the dating and the wooing and that aspect of meeting someone and getting to know them, the emotional part. And then the other person doesn't want that. They want more infrequent sexual encounters.
But I would imagine that seems more common than the idea that we would both want the same thing at the same time all the time.
Oh, for sure.
Right.
For sure.
But the key, again, is to speak openly about what you're actually wanting, what you're really wanting, and put it out there and see how the other person feels about it and talk about it and see where there is enough overlap that you could agree to those things. Or if there's not, then you say, okay, well, let's back up a little bit and find our comfort level and go from there.
Yeah, absolutely. So we did 2 episodes on transitions and consensual non-monogamy, so you probably want to catch those, but here's a few of the highlights. And I think that you've already talked about the first one, which was being specific on what you're looking for. So there's clarity and consent for everyone involved.
Be specific and honest about what you're looking for, right? Because you might want something, but think, well, I don't really want to announce it because I'm not sure how it's going to land, or is the other person going to feel hurt by it or whatever. But then you're not really announcing your true position. So announce it. Doesn't mean that you're actually going to get it, but at least try to be as honest as you can with yourself and the other person.
Yeah, and I think it's important to include what makes it important to do that, right?
Right.
So, maybe you want to be more polyamorous, not necessarily because you want to have more partners and you want to, I don't know. It's like for some people, it's more that they can only have those sexual relationships when they feel there's an emotional connection, right? So that might help the other person who maybe doesn't want that situation or feels jealous about those situations to understand that it's more about what it's more about and why it's important to you. I don't know if I didn't say that.
No, I think the why is very important, right? What is my motive in doing this, right? So is there a deficit? Is there an issue that I am having and I fantasize, or I think, well, this would be a way of resolving that. And perhaps it will aid that, but really, am I not necessarily looking at what the core issue is? What is motivating me? And what am I wanting or trying to avoid from it?
For sure.
Mhm.
So if you find yourself in this situation, you may need to visit your values-based
Mhm.
agreement, relationship agreement, if you have one, or or create one, and see if it needs to be updated to create more security. So you may need different things in place to make you feel more secure in the relationship, so that you may not have needed before.
Mhm.
I think some of the couples that we talked to when we spoke at Oasis Aqua Lounge were talking about how, for some reason, it's easy to see your partner engaging in activities,
Mhm.
activities when you're present, but it's a whole other thing to know that your partner is excited and getting dressed up and planning dates
Mhm.
and getting emotionally attached to somebody new. It can feel more threatening. Yeah.
Good.
Mhm. So I think this is a common theme: is to take your time. You may be surprised by new feelings that come up that weren't there before. So jealousy, I think, sometimes is a big one that people are surprised by.
Yeah, but also not just the negative feelings that might come
Uh-huh.
up. You might be surprised by just how much you do like it and how stimulated you feel and how loved
Hmm.
you feel because there's a lot of love available.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
I sometimes forget the good things.
Mhm.
I guess I assume sometimes that people know the good things, but you're right. There's a lot of good.
Well, I think we want to, maybe not caution is too strong a word, but we want to kind of go into it with our eyes open and be consensual about it, consenting in it. But we want to be also cognizant of the idea of there's not only just the dangers, there are also wonderful facets that draw us to it.
Yeah, I mean, that's why we're
Mm.
here, and that's why we continue to share advice on this,
Mhm.
because we want people to navigate this and feel awesome about it, because it's been awesome for us.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right?
You don't know it without a doubt. It sure has. Yeah.
It sure has. Oh, and I forgot the one last thing, which we always say, and it's always good to end on this,
Mhm.
is
Communicate, communicate, communicate.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Communication is key for sure.
Communication is key in any of these
Mhm.
situations or in relationships in general. I
Yeah.
think people don't learn to communicate enough.
Well, yeah, I mean, it should be taught in elementary school or high school, right? And if you would have asked me years ago if I thought I was a good communicator, I would have said absolutely.
Absolutely.
But having gone through this journey, I found out that I was not as wonderful a communicator as I thought I was, and I've learned a lot. And you've been wonderful at helping me with that. And now
You've been
uh, we've
wonderful.
helped each other
Yes.
because we were open to it and honest to talk about it.
Mhm.
And now we've recognized certain things that might have felt foreign, right? Like communication attunement, for example, how
Mhm.
to communicate more effectively. And it seemed rather foreign in the beginning, kind of contrived. But
Yeah.
now I think we integrate it really well, where it's just our new nature. And we
Mhm.
do communicate in those ways. And we catch ourselves
Oh, yeah, I
when
was
we've
gonna
stopped.
say that.
Yeah, right. So it does happen. We go away from it, and then we might be prompted. Hey, are we subscribing to this good, healthy pattern of
Mhm.
communicating, or have we fallen back to those old ways? And
Yeah.
those gentle prompts can bring us back.
Yeah, I mean, it happened this weekend. We
Mhm.
had a situation,
Oh
and we
yeah.
we both woke up and we were like, "Oh, I mean, I could have done this," and you said, "Well, I'm sorry," and you said, "I could have said that in a different way, or I was
Right.
feeling this," and that sort of thing, and I was like, "Yeah, I was, whatever," and we really catch ourselves faster.
Yeah. Well, what I liked about that was that I was able to recognize my part in it and
Mhm.
what I could have done differently, and also I was able to alert to you what it was that you were saying or how you might have done it that was triggering for me or set me off. Right.
Hmm.
So it's a two-way street, and it's great that we're both willing to participate in that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
awesome.
Cool.
All right. So that's accidental polyamory. I'm
Right.
sure we missed a lot of different topics. You can always share those with us.
Mhm.
There's actually a group on Facebook called, they say it's accidental polyamory, or some call it accidental. Anyways,
Mhm.
it's interesting. There's a whole group. I don't know if it's necessarily about this, but it's like it's on the topic. So, we want to encourage and support your support in spreading the word about polyamory and normalizing it as a valid relationship identity. That's why we're here, and we want the best for you. And we believe that polyamory can be secure and long lasting. So we've got, as we said, we've got various supports available. One of them is our Poly Newbies digital course. And we decided to reduce the cost on it because we want more people to access this valuable resource. So we have a special link for that. It's a 7-module course, which covers various things to set the foundation for like we said, a secure, sexy, and supportive polyamorous relationship. We'll put that in the show notes. And yeah, I'm super happy about this resource. Which is why
Yeah.
we want to get it out there. So thank you for listening.
Mm.
And make sure if you're watching this or listening to this on a podcasting platform that you subscribe, and feel free to share it with your friends and lovers.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, Andre.
Thanks, Tara.
That was
Thank you,
super
everyone.
fun. All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye.